So my name is Nathan Bougie, and I am a former web developer. I spent about 10 years doing a lot of web development stuff. And in those 10 years, I never really thought about search engine optimization. I was too busy thinking about how to build a page, how to build the next cool thing. So how people got to my page was always an afterthought. And when I talk to a lot of folks in the industry, I get the same sense even today that it's all about the page you're building, the experience you're building, and traffic and how you market that is kind of an afterthought. So the session I pitched to the folks running MIX is that we should do a session all about search engine optimization, why it's important for application developers, and then if you're building web apps, what should you be doing? Now this is going to be a little non-traditional for a MIX presentation because I love demos and hands-on stuff. So one thing I'd like to do is invite everybody here. You've got, well, don't use your survey because you have to tell people how awesome I am. But instead, there's pads of paper up front, there's pads in the back, there's pens. If anybody has a website that they would like me to take a look at, I've got some time booked at the end. We can actually go through some real websites and tell you guys, I'll be really gentle, but we'll give you some pointers on things that you might improve. So yeah. Let me see, what else was I going to say? So another thing I get a lot when I talk to folks is there's a lot of misconceptions about SEO out there. I'll go and I'll talk to a web developer and they'll say, hey, sorry, my site's not about robots. My site's about people, and I want to build a website for people. So no thanks to any of that SEO stuff. That's not entirely true. All SEO, everything we'll talk about today, is stuff that's equally valuable for users, as well as for information architecture, as well as for robots and down-level experiences. So the other big misconception is inside our company, inside our search engine. A lot of folks think, oh, if they're doing SEO, a lot of our engineers think, if they're doing SEO, they're trying to spam me, they're trying to game the system. Let's go get them. Anyone doing SEO, let's get them. That's not quite right either. SEO is an important part of anything that is on the internet. It's basically a set of due diligences that will help you get the right representation and right visibility to your content. So the deck. So I pulled a lot of content together for this deck. There's 3 main sections that break apart best practices for your applications. We won't be able to cover it all. My goal for this presentation is to just kind of highlight some of the big issues, talk about solutions, and then give you guys a deck that you can take with you that links to all the best practice articles, all the white papers, and then highlights a bunch of advanced stuff that we won't have time to talk about unless someone brings it up in Q&A. And the last thing is Q&A. So we have 2 opportunities to do questions. I'll ask you to hold your questions until there's a big sign that says questions on the screen. And that will be about halfway through and then at the end. We also have a site review, which I mentioned, and only one person has come up and grabbed the piece of paper. And I can't imagine that there's only one person in the audience that has a website they want reviewed. So do it. Come on, just do it. Let's see. And then there's this thing called open space, and that's after the session. There's this place up there in the sandbox, and I'll be there to answer any questions. And if you'd like me to do a site review with you in private, more than happy to do that. So let's get going. Who is this? So who is this joker? I'm Nathan Bougie. I'm the lead program manager of the Webmaster Center for Live. Nice. If you guys just leave it in a pile here, I will. Las Vegas. Nice. I'm the lead program manager of this effort called the Webmaster Tools. Yes, rock your non-English. So I run the Webmaster Center, and essentially our charter in life is twofold. The first one is to build a set of tools for any web developer, any SEO, any agency out there that needs to get better results from a search engine. We think about that in a couple ways. The first way is a set of troubleshooting tools. So these are some tools that we build that you guys can take and use and say, hey, are there any issues that they're having crawling or indexing my website? We have other tools that allow you to help manage your own content. Everything from you giving us a list of all your pages that you would like us to index to you giving us feedback on how we display and render those pages. We also have, and this is one of our key features, is business intelligence. As a search engine, we have a real pulse on what people are thinking and what people are doing, as well as what's working well online in terms of marketing and what isn't working well. So we have a lot of data that can help people build more effective online businesses. And then feedback and support. Search is mission critical for a lot of web businesses, especially if you're like a Nordstrom's or a toy store and Christmas is approaching. If we're not crawling your pages frequently, that could be a big deal. So that's what I do, that's what I work on. And the other part of my charter is to be an advocate, both kind of an evangelist externally for search engine optimization, and then an advocate for web developers and SEOs internally to our search engine. So quickly we'll talk about why you should care about SEO. Before we get into it, who here is a developer? Raise your hand. Right on. Who here manages developers? Okay, right on. Anybody here non-technical? Right on. Okay, good. We'll have stuff for everybody. So I got so many questions. I love to ask questions of you guys. So who here is thinking about SEO in their applications today when they build them? That's pretty good. I like that. And who here is building rich internet applications? RIAs, Silverlight, Flash. Okay, good. So I'm hoping this will be an easy sell. Why should you care about SEO? Essentially what I did is I pulled the referrer log for my blog. So this is how people get to my blog. It's 43% search. If you take a look at all the websites out there, 30% of all traffic going to websites is from search engines. Who has websites that get more than 30% of their referral traffic from search engines? Okay. Right on. More than 50%? Same couple people. Right on. The reason this is so important is because there's too much information out there. And going to your URL, going to your address bar and typing in an address, there's a lot of ways you can mess that up, and that could not work. Search is a very forgiving experience. It's a very rich experience, and we're seeing consumers year over year use it more and more. For example, if people are going to buy something online, 86% of the time they start with a search engine, which is a big deal if you're an e-commerce store. So quickly, what is SEO? It's not the paid, it's the organic. It's everything on that left-hand side, including the top local listings. We call that an instant answer, that's structured data that we get, as well as the 10 blue links that we call below that. All organic. Paid is everything else. Woo. All right, I went the wrong way. So search engine optimization, it's also just good practices. Everything we talk about today are things that are recommended for usability, are recommended for down-level experiences, whether they're mobile or accessibility experiences, or for information architecture. And these are my 3 favorite books, so go get them, and my favorite websites below. So I wanted to quickly go through how a search engine works. And there's 3 main parts to a search engine. There's the crawling, the ranking, and then the actual searching that people do. So from a crawling standpoint, this is MIX08's website. The first thing we do is we go to a website and we say, hey, give me the robots.txt file, because that will tell me what I can and cannot do with a website. So this is the actual robots.txt file for MIX08, and there's no exclusions. Essentially, we can go and have our way with this website. What you see there is a sitemap, which is a list of all the URLs in the website. So we go and look at the page, and we say, can we download this page? Policy-wise, legally, can we physically download the page? Is there any problems? And once we download the page, we take a look at it and say, okay, what's on this page? Is it good stuff? Give me all the links. Are there a lot of links on this page? Where do they go? We ask, how does this page compare with prior versions of this page? Is it changing? How does this page relate to all the other pages that we think are about this same topic? Maybe it's on this site, maybe it's off this site. And then we say, hey, is there anything unusual about this page? If there is something unusual about this page, it could be a red flag that says, whoa, we don't want to touch it. We want to just let it go. And if it passes all those gates, we may store a copy of the page. And when we store a copy of the page, what we do is we chunk it. So we break it down into all the little bits, whether they're images or header tags, body tags, pieces, and we store them separately. So sorry, I forgot. That's how we look at the page. It doesn't look as pretty. Ranking. So the next step, once we've gathered all of our pages in our index, Then we go through and we rank those pages. And the primary variable we use to rank a page is inbound links. We started with the premise that a link is really a sort of an endorsement from one website to another website or one page to another page. So what we do is we build a list for every single page in our index, of which we have over 20 billion pages. We build a list of all of the links coming into that page and all the links going out of that page. And we try and assess how important are those links. For example, if Microsoft.com is linking to the Mix page, that's a really important link because Microsoft.com is a very credible site. There's a big company behind it. A lot of people link to Microsoft.com. So that could be a big green arrow. Whereas my blog, Nathan Bougie's blog, which nobody reads, not even my mom, even though I ask her, come take a look at it, that would be a white arrow because it's a link, but it doesn't really add a whole lot of value. And then occasionally there's one of those orange arrows in the upper right-hand corner. And those are links that may degrade your value. Those could be really bad sites linking into your website. Generally, it's not a problem, so I won't really talk about it. But essentially, the big things to remember as a developer, links are really, really important. Both the links going outbound from your website as well as the links coming to your website. Another thing that's really important is domain name structure. We treat host names, which are subdomains, like msdn.microsoft.com, we treat that very differently than microsoft.com/msdn. So you want to take that into account as you build and architect your applications. And the last major piece of search is the actual searching. This is where a customer comes to our front end and they want something. So in this case, let's take MIX08. It's a standard keyword. It's what we think of as a keyword. So they type that in, they hit OK. Our robot goes through and thinks about that. So the first thing we think about is that spelled right? Is that really the term they're looking for? Or is there a better term that we should look for instead? Then we try and understand what's their intent. Are they looking to buy something? Are they looking for an advertisement? Are they looking for a website, just a navigational query? Are they looking for videos, that sort of thing? Then once we figure out their intent, we take a look at all the 20 billion pages we have, plus all the billions of images we have, all the videos we have, all the structured content we have, RSS feeds, and we try and pull together what we think are the best set of results for that. And then we order them based on how applicable we think they are to the search term. And you get your 10 blue links here, or an instant answer, or some combination of those. So that's all fine and good, but how does that impact an actual page that I'm building? The first thing you guys should think about, and I'm starting at the beginning, is actually building the page. Because if a robot can't crawl the page, we can't put it in our index, and we can't show it to our users. So right here are two snippets. They look identical to the customer. But to a robot, they can look very, very different. For example, on the left-hand side, the developer is using the H1 tag to denote the heading of the article. And on the right-hand side, the developer is achieving the exact same result for the customer, but they're using a span and some other JavaScript implementation. So to a customer, it looks the exact same. But to a robot, they look vastly different. The robots see the title tag and the heading tag as the two most important indicators of what that page is about. So the guy on the left-hand side is going to get his article surfaced much more quickly or much more appropriately than the guy on the right-hand side. So the first thing you should really do is use all of the HTML tags semantically. These are the most common tags, and really the top 4 are the most important. Anchor tag is number 1 because links, again, are the primary variable that we use to determine the reputation or the ranking of a page. And one thing you need to make sure is the text in that link is really important. So if you're linking to an article and you say, click here for more information, and the hyperlink is under more information, as a search engine, all we know about that link is the URL and more information. If instead you were to link, check out my article on the Democratic primaries, and underlink Democratic primaries, we now have Democratic primaries in addition to the URL to add context to where that goes. So the anchor tag is really, really important. So is the heading tag. This is the number 1, actually after the title tag, those are the number 1 and 2 places that we go to get information or that we use to assess what your page is really about. And then in the meta tag, this is the last one I'll talk about, is the description. So the description is used in our search results. That's what we actually put under the title in our search results. And if you don't have one, by default, we have to figure out one on our own. And we're almost never as good at figuring one out as webmasters are at telling us what it should be. JavaScript and CSS. There used to be a lot of advice around JavaScript. Now the real big thing, just make sure you don't lock your navigation behind JavaScript. We see on a lot of websites that they'll put the top-level navigation, they'll implement that in JavaScript, some combination of JavaScript and CSS. Anything inside JavaScript tags, search engines typically can't follow. Google will do a little bit, but generally not very much. So if it's behind JavaScript, it's like a black box. The old advice used to be also take all your JavaScript off page, take your CSS off page, put it at the bottom. That doesn't really matter anymore. The new advice, those are still best practices for performance, but they're not really applicable to search. So rich applications, Java, Flash, even images sometimes and videos, those are things that tend to look like black boxes for search engines. This is a great example. This is Nike's store. If you were to go to Nike's store and search for LeBron, what we have is LeBron's product homepage. These are his branded shoes, his branded coat, and his branded pants. And it's a great, rich experience for customers. You can go in there, everything's dynamic, it moves around, you can interact with it. It's awesome. But when a search engine comes and takes a look at the page, we don't get anywhere near as interesting or compelling an experience. This is all we have to understand the page. So even though this is LeBron's product page, we wouldn't know that because it just says Nike.com at the top. And then there's no actual content in the page, but there is a lot of code in the page. And the one opportunity they have to tell us what's in that rich object, they haven't taken with the NoScript tag, so we know nothing. And they're not validating their HTML. Their body tag isn't closed, so they're not validating their HTML, which could lead to other rendering problems. So this may not be a big problem. It all depends on what your website is about. There's a couple different types of RIAs out there. The first one is a monolithic RIA. And this is like taking a desktop app and just sticking it on the web with the URL. In a lot of cases, this is exactly the right thing to do. For example, with an email client. You don't want a search engine crawling through your email client and indexing your mail and making it available. So that makes a great black box. Just like a lot of the rich configuration tools and admin tools on the web. The next level down is linkable. This is where you have a website with a lot of rich objects kind of strung together, but you can still link directly to different versions of them. A great example is VW.com. They have a very dynamic, rich user experience, but each car has its own URL. Each feature has its own URL within a car, so you can still link that page, and search engines can still crawl all of that and drive customers to the right place. And when the customers get there, they have a very rich experience. The most flexible example, or the most flexible version, is a crawlable page. So this is where you have an HTML page where an RIA is used to spice up the page, not as a gateway to the content for the page. A great example of this is finance.yahoo.com, where when you go there, there's lots of content in HTML, information about the company, descriptions, stock quotes. But when you want to interact with the data, the historical data, they have this very rich application that you can interact with and do some research. So the problems generally arise when you build an application up here, but you have goals down here, like Nike.com does. For example, Nike.com is building one of these, but it won't ever rank well because they're not, there's no real guides or cues for the search engine to rank on. So just make sure that as you're strategizing to build your pieces, make sure that the approach you take meets the goals that you have as a business. And then tips and tricks. So this is a set of resources for you guys to take afterwards. They're basically all the stuff that we have for ASP.NET and Silverlight. to essentially do the best practices. So ASP.NET by default does not validate XHTML. There's a white paper on how you do that, and then a compatibility pack that you guys can download. And then Silverlight is something that we talk a lot about, how that, since we're using XAML and more text-based stuff, that there may be a better way to let search engines know what's inside. So there's a link down there to a guy who's done some stuff. He's done some experiments, and he uses XSLT to kind of reflect some of the text within the app onto the actual page itself. So you guys can check that out as well. And what I wanted to do to walk through these and show the impact that you can have on your business was to take a site and do an example site review. And I thought the best site review would be MIX, the Visit MIX site. Because leading up to this conference, about 100 times I go to my favorite search engine and type in MIX08, and I'd get something that looked like this. In fact, this was the top search result for MIX a few months ago. And essentially what you see is there's really no title tag. It's just the URL. There's no description. And the URL down below, 2008/index.html, that page doesn't exist anymore. So for the first 2 or 3 months, or 2 or 3 months ago, this was the #1 result. And when I say #1 result, it was the top result for MIX, but it wasn't #1 on the page. In fact, everybody's blog was beating MIX. It was hard to find the site. What I wanted to do, the first place that you should start always with a site review is try and figure out what the problem is. So what we're going to do here to test the problem is we're going to search for MIX08, which is a very unique term on the web. There shouldn't be a whole lot of websites vying for this term. And then this is the URL that we want them to go to. Owning this website, this is where we're trying to steer our customers. So this is what happens today, or actually 2 days ago, if you search in Google. And what you'll notice is the title's good. The title's pretty representative. The description, it's not really related to the event. The Signal is a weekly podcast that connects you behind-the-scenes activity related to MIX08. Thomas Lewis and Michael Swan. So that doesn't describe the event. That's not going to get your customers to click on your result. And let's look at the link. The link is OK. So Google's figured out the title. They figured out the link. But they haven't gotten the description. Yahoo, again, look at that title. That title is OK, but there's a little bit of ambiguity there, right? Because Mix Online could be just about anything. It's not necessarily MIX08, the conference. So title's not very good. And again, the description. Microsoft's conversation with Next web and interactive agency professionals, that's OK. But what's up with the 7 things you may not know? Again, probably not ideal. And the URL, that's not the right URL that we're trying to drive people to. That's the parent page of the site. But still, it's not exactly where they're looking for. The second one's a lot better. That's the result that we wanted at the top. It's just not at the top. And then live search. Again, the title, yeah, it's OK. But it's not really what the title should be. The description, this kind of looks like an ad for the Venetian more than it does describing the conference, right? And then it turns out the reason it's an ad for the Venetian is it's registered at Visit Mix. It's not the actual page. So that's not where they're trying to steer people. And the second result, it's a little bit better. This is actually the result that we want at the top, but the description is just as bad. Headlines, period. 7 things you may not know about MIX08. So let's look at a summary. It looks like there's a lot of issues, essentially around ranking and descriptions. So let's go and take a look at the MIX website and see if we can discover what's going on here. And so this is the website right here that we get. Let's first take a look at it in the way that a search engine would look at it. So search engines don't really deal with JavaScript. They don't really do CSS. So this is what the search engine sees. All in all, it looks OK, not a whole lot. If you notice, a lot of the descriptions, they said, actually, let's take a look inside the page first. Let's see how they're doing their HTML. Tools, Firebug. I like this thing because it's beautiful. Firebug rocks. Who uses Firebug here? Yeah, right on. All right, so let's take a look at the head, first of all. So their title, pretty good. A good descriptive title, tells us when and where, everything we need to know. But one thing I noticed is there's no description tag. So because there's no description tag, this is why they're getting this kind of crazy Frankenstein description on all their pages, because the search engines are trying to figure it out on their own. So if we go back and take a look at the page, you'll notice almost all the descriptions started with headline. They're actually grabbing this right here. What the search engines do is they find the first header tag, or the first kind of piece of real content on the page when they build the description. And for this page, we look at the top and we're like, this is probably navigation, right? And it turns out to be navigation. So we don't want that in the description. So we grab this heading tag, and then we tend to grab whatever article is right here. So this article is generally piecemealed into that description tag. And because those articles change all the time, you'll see that each search engine has a slightly different description based on when they last crawled the website. So probably not ideal, probably not what you're looking for. But that's the solution to the first part. So we turned off JavaScript, and it doesn't look like there's any JavaScript issues on the page. Not a whole lot of JavaScript. But how do I get back to my... But what's the deal with this? Why did this show up for so long as being the #1 homepage? Let's go take a look at that page and see what happens. All right. So it is index.htm, index.html. That's not a very good page. So remember, I had disabled JavaScript. So let's take a look at the source of this page. And let's not have it show up on my laptop. Here we go. So this is the problem right here. Location.href equals the new website. So it looks like they're implementing a redirect in JavaScript, which is something that all major search engines will stop at. Well, Google will follow this, but Yahoo, Microsoft, and AOL will not follow this, or Ask will not follow this. So that's a big problem. Let's take a look and see how big of a problem it is. All right. Cool. All right. So index.html. So this is a tool right here. It's called the Yahoo Site Explorer. It's a way to take a look at all the inbound links to your page. And remember, inbound links to your page, this is how we assess the value of every page. So if you look at index.htm, that has 16,000 inbound links. That's pretty good. That's a lot of value. That means that on the web, we've found in total 16,000 different sites that are talking about MIX, specifically this URL. But when you look for default.aspx, there's only 8,000 or 5,800 links pointing to that page. It's kind of weird. It looks like what probably happened here was when they first launched the conference, they hired an agency that went out and built a static page, that static index.htm page. And the way the default documents are set up on the server, my guess is index.htm is the default document, not default.aspx. So what they had to do was when they went out and finally built the full dynamic website, they had to kind of shoehorn it in, and they used JavaScript to redirect from the old experience to the new experience. The problem is the search engines never made that leap. And you can take a look here. Most of the links they got were on the old thing, the initial thing that they set up, not on the new thing. So what they've done is they have diluted the ranking of their page by taking that approach, and that's why they weren't ranking higher than Scott Guthrie or any other blog pointing to this site initially. Does that make sense? Questions?
So what to do in this situation if you have static pages and you're moving to dynamic pages?
The question is, what should you do in this situation? So you've got a bunch of static pages, you're moving to dynamic pages. That's a great question. That is when you would want to look at a server level redirect. So if you're using Apache, just use your htaccess file and just build a massive table of the old stuff to the new stuff. If you're using IIS, you want to do a very similar thing. And you want to make sure you do a 301 redirect, not a 302 redirect. There's another question back there.
Yeah. Yes, this was one that I wanted to ask. But another one is you said inbound and outbound links matter. Right? How do outbound links matter?
So you don't, you shouldn't get too caught up with how outbound links matter. What we want to know is, Outbound links, basically where you're linking to, helps us understand what content is on your website. So if you're a website all about cooking, but all of your outbound links point to NASA, we get really confused. And we'll probably rank you a little bit lower because of that. But if you're a site all about ASP.NET, and all of your outbound links point to ASP.NET, Scott Guthrie's blog, MSDN, then we're like, right on. You look, you smell, you taste exactly like a technology blog, so we'll better rate you for those queries. Make sense?
Yeah.
Oh, follow?
With the whole monolithic RIA model that you talked about,
Yeah.
how do you compensate? So if you have a monolithic RIA like the Nike site, how would you compensate for SEO rankings?
That's a great great and involved question. So the question is, if you have a RIA, if you have a monolithic app, a desktop app that you've just stuck on the web, how do you maximize the SEO thing that you can get out of that, the link juice? I think it goes back to what your goals are for that application. If your goals are that you want people to link within that application, if that's a gateway for your content, then you need to break it open and do something different. You need to take a different approach. But if it's just an application that you want to drive people towards, say like an email application, what I would recommend is build a lightweight HTML page in front of it that loads super quick, and make sure that page describes what's behind it. And that way people will link to that page and they'll go straight to your RIA page. Next question? Yeah.
Is there situation when you are overdoing this stuff and you get penalized for too much keywords, page one, text?
The question is about penalties. How far do you have to go in terms of doing search engine optimization before you start getting penalized for it? That's a tough question to answer. Whenever you get into an edge case, whenever you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole, you might be running into problems. And anytime you try and do a bait and a switch with a search engine. So a lot of times we'll see folks will make the content look like this to a search engine, but when customers get there later, it may look completely different. Did you have a more specific question?
But using keywords, too many, the same keywords, too many
Okay.
times to optimize, it's the same content, it's okay for people.
So the question is more about kind of keyword density and what's actually on the page. What we look for is anything you do in a rich app should mirror very closely what you do in the NoScript tag or the content that you have for browsers. All search engines use a method or use a combination of automatic detection along with human detection. So you've got both sorts of things that may or may not be evaluating your pages. In terms of the density of keywords, if you write content for your customers and you use the language that they use, you'll be fine. If you write language for search engines, eventually we'll figure it out and you'll be penalized. Question way back there. So there's a microphone right there. If you don't feel comfortable yelling at me, use the microphone or just yell, so I can hear.
The web is moving towards a RIA environment, okay, Silverlight, Flash, anything else. Isn't it time for the web engines to get a keyword like meta robot and redirect the robot somewhere that has description on the RIA?
So the question is, the world is moving towards rich applications, RIAs. Shouldn't the search engines do something more, like support a down-level experience that represents that page? The difficult part for search engines is a lot of people, unscrupulous people, which I'm sure none of them are in this room today, a lot of unscrupulous people will do a bait and switch. They'll give one thing to us and give a completely different thing to their customers. It's a tactic known as cloaking today, and a lot of sites do it for illegitimate purposes, and then there's a bunch of sites that do it because it's a legitimate thing that they need to do. Search engines really haven't figured out how to solve this problem yet because we haven't found a technical solution that will help us avoid the spam as well as work for the legitimate content out there. So I guess the advice we have today is kind of go back to the RIA strategy guide and make sure that the goals of the product you're building meet the goals or meet the capabilities of that technology. Any more questions? Yeah, right there. The question is about how fresh is your content and how does that relate to ranking. So the answer is it depends. It depends on the type of content that you provide. If you're a news or a news site or a blog, then freshness of your content is really, really, really important. But if you're just a normal website like the IRS.gov or just some reference website, you may rank well irrespective of which. Freshness is always a positive thing. From a traditional marketing standpoint, freshness is great because it gives your users more content to come back and engage again and again and again. So we always recommend be as fresh as you can, but it won't necessarily kill you. There's another question right behind.
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit more about like the different kinds of results that you would get using, like putting content in a different namespace or like a different host name versus as a slug on one URL?
Okay, so the question is about, and let me make sure I understand this. So the question is about URLs and when should you use a subdomain versus a folder versus a file name? Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. So it's all trade-offs, and it all depends on what you're trying to achieve. So if you use subdomains, you should know that we aggregate rank based on that subdomain as well as at the page level. So that's the first thing. If you, that's tough. Yeah, so if you, yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. So basically what you want to do is go back to what's good for your users. If you have 10,000 things that you want to break out, maybe it's a page, maybe you want to have a content section for every product you have. You could do that as a subdomain, but if search engines see the subdomains growing very, very quickly, we could flag that and be and wonder, you know, is this a blog spot? Is this a bunch of low-quality sites that are being creating very quickly? The other way to look at that is if it's folders, it might be more appropriate for those to grow quickly. But you should also look at how some of that page rank aggregates or the ranking aggregates. So if you have your site /products / and then each product, it may aggregate more appropriately. So as you release a new product, it might benefit from some of that previous ranking that's happened, versus if your product was a subdomain, it would start from scratch every time. Does that make sense? But you should try and be as descriptive as possible in all of those areas. So if you have a product like, I don't know, a car, a Volkswagen Jetta, you want to make sure that you're using the words Volkswagen and Jetta as opposed to product 34129 or something like that, both from a user standpoint as well as a search engine standpoint. Any more questions? Right back there. You got to use a microphone. I can't hear you.
Imagine you have a website with some static content, okay? And as soon as it loads, you start bringing content that is yours, but it is hosted somewhere else. Have you thought of a way to rank the extra content that is dynamic? You cannot crawl it. You could, though, have a private public key thing that you could provide to the site and tell the robot that, yes, it is me, and my extra content is somewhere there. Can you please crawl this as well?
So the question is about dynamic content, and it seems like it was a proposed solution to use a public-private key infrastructure to basically say, hey, we're legit. This is real content. We've authenticated. So when we're asking you to go over here and take a look at this non-dynamic content, we want to be reputable. So we crawl 20 billion pages about once a month. That's a whole lot of additional work being asked to, I guess, that you would have to do, both on each individual site that wants to implement that, as well as on the search engine to crawl that. So that may not be feasible from an implementation standpoint.
Yeah, but at some point, sites will go towards there, so a solution must be found, no?
A solution will be found, and I think we should put that in as a discussion point for the open space, and you guys can come and beat me up and do whatever you want. Any more questions? So we're going to get into the fun stuff. That was the easy stuff. All right, URLs and linking. So as I've said earlier, URLs are really, really important because they're the main conveyor of reputation. So say you're a store and you've got this product and you want to sell that over the web. You want people to come and find that product. what I did is I went out to 3 different stores on the web, and I pulled the URLs they had for this product. So these are all 3 legitimate stores. I hid their names for safety. So these are all 3 legitimate solutions to that problem, or 3 legitimate URLs. But when a robot crawls that URL, it parses it into chunks and tries to figure out, is there anything in this URL that can help me get some context around what's on this page? So in that first URL, there's not a whole lot there, right? There's a bunch of tags, but they're mostly misleading. None of them help me identify that this is a Zune, a black Zune that's 80 gigabytes. The second URL looks a lot better. In fact, the second URL is probably something that customers would feel a lot better cutting and pasting in an email, because they look at it and they're like, oh yeah, it's a Microsoft Zune, I get it. I see what that is, 2nd gen, right on. The first one they might say, hey, is this spam? Like, what the heck is this thing? So the second one is better for your customers, but it's not really much better from a search engine standpoint, because search engines interpret underscores, delimiting your strings. We assume that's all one big word. And this comes back to the day, all the people that built search engines are hardcore C programmers. So they're thinking pound define space max underscore int underscore blah, 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 blah. They look at that and they're like, oh, that's one word, right? That's not multiple words. There's also a consumer usability issue here, because a lot of consumers will take a look at Microsoft underscore Zune, and they'll get confused between the underscore and the underline for a URL. And they might think that those are spaces. So there's also a bit of a usability problem there. The final one, and the one that's just right, is when you delineate or delimit your strings with dashes. And you should do this everywhere, from URL names, from file names for your images to names of your URLs when you do slugs, stuff like that. So what we do is we split it based on the dash, and then we have a whole bunch of keywords that we associate with that page. And this is amplified by the fact that every single link back to your website is now going to contain those keywords about your website. So it kind of amplifies the context we have around that page. The next thing is status codes. So status codes are a response. Every time MSN bot, which is the name of our crawler, every time a search bot comes and requests a page, that server gives us a number back that tells us basically what happened after that request. So these are 2 of the most common. 200 means everything's A-OK, you got your page, go have fun with it. 404 means that page wasn't there. Don't know what happened, it's just not there. The biggest issue that we have is, or that we encounter, is that a lot of folks, they don't like serving up 404 pages to their customers, because they see that as an opportunity to show other content for their customers. So what they'll do in that case is they'll return 200 to a browser, ostensibly, and then in that return page, they'll be like, hey, we were not able to find what you're looking for, but here's some other things we think you might be interested in. That is a good experience for customers, but because they're not returning the 404, the search engine doesn't realize that that's not a real page. And the search engine may get lost trying to index every single possible page on your website, although because you return 200 for every single non-existent page, we could crawl for infinite, ad infinitum. So we'll crawl for a long time. And then we'll get bored and we'll say, you know what, we can't crawl the site anymore, and we'll stop crawling. And what we'll have, the picture we'll have of your website will not be a representative sample of what is on your website. So net, use 404s. I guess the follow-on to that is you should never use a 404. So if you're telling your customers that there was a link out there that no longer is applicable, you've basically lost all that traffic to your website. So what we recommend as a best practice is to 301 that, do a 301 redirect, and I'll discuss those in a second, that 404 page to another page. So assume you have a product, and this is a real customer example. They have a product, it was before Christmas, they ran out of inventory, they just 404'd the page. Whoops, gone, doesn't exist anymore. A better solution would be to 301 that page to like a newsletter page that says, hey, we're temporarily out of stock with this, but if you would like to sign up to get an email when we have more, type it here. That way the search engine would get that second page and serve that up to your users as well. So net, never use soft 404s, which is using a 200, and then use 404s sparingly. So the two most important status codes, 301 moved permanently and 302 moved temporarily. When a lot of people re-architect websites, they move domains, it just happens all the time. So what 301 does is it says, hey, this thing that you used to be looking for, now it's actually over here. Make that change permanent. So in those cases, what we do is we take all that reputation that existed over here and we give it to the new page. We make the change in our index. Old one's no longer valid. Only use a new one, and you're good to go. 302 is a little bit more complicated because it's moved temporarily. That's kind of ambiguous. We never know what moved temporarily means, and people use it in a lot of different ways. So our recommendation, don't use 302s. Unless you're super advanced and you know all the implications, don't use them. And then this is the last. This is super advanced. 304 not modified. So there's a feature in the HTTP protocol called conditional get. And basically what happens is the robot goes out to your page and says, hey, have you updated your page since Christmas 2008? And if you say no, we'll be like, cool, we already got it, right on, good. But if we don't have that, if we don't have the latest version of the page, then we'll go and download the new one. What this does is it saves a lot of bandwidth. So if you notice us crawling your page every single day, but you don't update your page every single day, you'll want to make sure that you're supporting conditional get so that we're not killing your bandwidth. And this is supported in most major servers, Lite, HTTPD, Apache, and IIS. So just go use it. There's one more that I didn't put up here. It's 503, and 503 means we're down for maintenance. If your site goes down, make sure you're returning that. Otherwise, we may be like, oh, site's gone. Let's kill it from our index. So, canonicalization. All right, pop quiz. What's the difference between these URLs? Does anyone think there's a difference? Right on. So to a user, they expect that these kind of go to the same place, right? But a robot, a search engine, all right, this does not work at all. Ah. There we go. Okay, cool. But a robot sees them as being completely different pages. Because, and the way domain name, the way DNS works is those could resolve to a completely different page, and there's a small subset of people who actually use those to resolve to different pages. So in that case, we can never make the assumption that they're all the same, leading to a lot of problems. Essentially, what we do is, since we treat those each differently, we assign a reputation to the top one that's different from the reputation to the second one, that's different to the reputation from the third one. So if you've got all this reputation divided by 3, that could be a big hit to the total reputation of your site, especially if you're a new site. Every link counts a lot. So our recommendation is choose one option and stick with it. Yes, choose one option and stick with it. And then 301, the other one that you don't do, to your preferred option. So how big of a problem is this? Well, let's take a look at visitmix.com. So visitmix.com is 71,000 inlinks. That's pretty good. Not a lot of sites have that. But then look at www. There's 33,000. So that's like a third, almost a half that they have in another domain. So then let's look at www. /capital default.aspx. That's 500. And then lowercase default.aspx. That's 14. So what you see is there's actually hundreds, maybe not hundreds, there's tens of permutations of this. And each one is dividing your page rank. But if you were to go through in 301, just the www to non-www, you cut out half of those. And all of them that really you'll get the 80% of the value. Because you notice it's a diminishing return, right? You got 14, then 500. 30 is when 30,000 is really meaningful. So, I forgot to mention the first thing I talked about when we went through the different URLs. That's called URL rewriting, and it's a really, really super important thing to do. ASP.NET over the past couple of years has amped up their support for URL rewriting, and if you're using it with IIS 7, it's really easy to do all client side or all developer side without accessing the server. But for IIS 6, you're more limited, but there's still a bunch of really cool stuff you can do. So I linked to an article Scott Guthrie did, which is a really good article, just going into all the different ways you can do it. And then once you do URL rewriting, you run into that kind of soft 404 issue that we talked about earlier, where every page returns a 200 instead of a 404. So there's a workaround for how to manage that, which is the second link. And then we have a couple pages where we talk about this is the code for doing a 301 redirect in ASP.NET. And then this is how you do this is how you do the canonicalization. So this is how you move from dub to non-dub, or from non-dub to permanently dub. I love that people are taking pictures of code on a screenshot. So anybody who wants in the open space, I'll give you a copy of the deck right now, so you don't have to wait. Yes. Oh, and this is how you do a 301 redirect in IS. Make sure you click that little box down there, or it will be a 302 redirect, which is bad. 302 equals bad. Any questions? Right there.
Are there any standards that search engines are moving towards, other than the ones you brought up for, like, say, ranking, title, which is in terms of how you aggregate, or how you create rankings? It seems to me like they're all over the board.
Yeah.
Have always been.
So the question is about standards. And are the search engines really that different? And if so, are they doing anything to move closer and closer together? Honestly, the search engines really aren't that different. They are at different levels of maturity, but they all use the same basic ranking algorithm. They all use the same basic technologies and techniques to crawl a page and understand what's on a page. And they all use the same basic ranking algorithms to figure out which page should come up first in a search result or not. There's subtle differences, but everything we talk about here, this is the stuff everybody agrees on that you should be doing. They have, over the past couple years, we have come up with a couple standards. The first is the Sitemaps initiative. And the Sitemaps is an XML document that you can basically give us a list of all the URLs in your website, a comprehensive list, so that we can do discovery against that. So we can figure out what percentage of your website are we actually crawling, and how many websites, how many pages are there out there. So that's the first standard. We're continuing to work with the other search engines to figure out how we can solve some of these issues, especially the RIA issue, and a bunch of other issues that certain publishers have. We don't have anything to announce yet, but I'm sure there'll be future announcements in the orange. And then we'll do the...
What is the relationship or the weight between the content that's pulled from the URL and the content that's pulled from header, title, meta, in terms of what the search engine is?
Okay, the question is about the relative weight between the content in the URL along with the content in the header and the title tag. It's about the same. It's all really important. So what you do, you want to make sure that you have descriptive title tags, descriptive URLs, and then descriptive content in your page. And you want to make sure that you're using the language that your customers use. So it's all equally important, which is a generalization, but that's as close as we get. So there's a guy back there in a dapper collar.
Two quick questions. So one, just want to confirm that casing matters for URLs. And the second question is actually, I think there's some controversy recently about Google toolbar hijacking 404s, I think. Any implications on that?
Okay, so I didn't get the first question.
Casing matters on URLs.
Yes. So the two questions, does case matter on URLs? And the second question is, do you have any comments on Google toolbar hijacking 404s? So the first question is, the answer to the first one is yes, case does matter. If you're using Apache or other major web servers, they are case sensitive. If you look at IIS in ASP.NET, it's case insensitive. Because the early days of the search engine, Apache was huge, and it still has a commanding market share of 50%. Case is really, really important. So you want to make sure that you're standard in how you do stuff. Also, if you use mono, ASP.NET mono, that's case sensitive as well. So one thing we recommend is always use lowercase letters. People rarely type shift D, fault.aspx. People just type default.aspx. Another good recommendation is when you're doing links to your homepage, never link to homepage /default.aspx. Always just link to your homepage, to the root, because most people link to the root. So you don't want to kind of sidetrack that. Comments on the Google toolbar? We don't have any public comments on the Google toolbar. Any other questions? Right there.
I was just going to say that while we try to be good at
Yeah.
plan for the Messenger Center to have that?
I can't comment on future roadmaps, so I can't tell you that it's something we're considering for spring. So I can't tell you that in like 3 months we're thinking about doing that, but I just can't say that. So the question is about dynamic URLs. What's that? Okay. The question is parameters in dynamic URLs. Yahoo has a great tool, siteexplorer.search.yahoo.com, where you can go in and tell Yahoo what those parameters do. The question is, do we have something? And the answer is no comment.
One more follow-up.
Yeah.
Even though you can't comment on it, would that happen on a pre or post-crawl basis?
So we can't promise anything. Essentially, all the data that comes through, the question is, would the metadata we use be used on a pre or post-crawl basis? And the answer is, all the data we get, whether it's a sitemap, it's a robot, well, not robot statistics, all the data we get on a sitemap and on your page, and through the webmaster tools, it's all suggestions. So it's one of like 400 different signals we use at every step of the algorithm to figure out what happens. So it's a much more complicated and nuanced answer than I can give. So right there, you've been so patient.
Confirmation, if I understand correctly, the subdomains don't inherit the reputation from the main site as much as the folder structure.
So the question is, subdomains don't carry as much rank as folder structure. So we aggregate rank at the subdomain level, which is the hostname level, and we don't aggregate rank at a folder level. That's as much as I can really say in terms of trade-off. I would look at your customers and your situations and figure out what's the best experience for your customers. If it really is subdomains, rock the subdomains and we'll figure it out. If it's folders, rock the folders and we'll figure it out.
Is this behavior in all search engines?
And the follow-up question is the behavior the same in all search engines? Google treats folders a little bit more like subdomains. The best way to find out the answer to that is go to mattcutts.com/blog, and he talks about that. We treat them differently, more differently. Us in Yahoo and Ask, well, Ask isn't a search engine anymore, but us in Yahoo treat them a little bit differently. Question.
Dashes in the image name. Should you be putting more information into the image name, or maybe even doing a handler on that to like put in, Zoom /whatever /30 gigabyte? Like, how does that work?
So the question is about image file names, and what should you be doing to optimize the image file names? If you think about it from a customer standpoint, it's a lot more intuitive to click on an image that's named Zune-80-GB-2nd Gen-Microsoft than it is to click on JPEG 4039.jpg. So definitely feel comfortable using some appropriate descriptors when you build your file names, and keep them the same. Don't change them, I guess.
How does that impact on SEO?
The question is, does that have an impact on SEO? That makes it easier for us to understand what the images are and makes it more likely that we'll serve those images up in our image search in appropriate contexts. Sound good? Question way in the back.
Does it make sense to use non-Latin characters on the URL in URL encoded form?
The question is, does it make sense to use non-Latin characters on, I didn't get the rest, on the URL string?
URL encoded form.
Okay. Yep. So the recommendation is, feel free to use non-Latin characters in your URLs as long as the pages are non-Latin pages. Yeah. Any other questions? Right there.
If I've got a site, like an e-commerce site that has different stores and categories within each store, and you kind of have different layers and directories to kind of navigate down to the specific level.
Yep.
How does that happen, or how does it work as far as indexing goes when all the content's, 5 directories deep? Does the indexing stop after a certain point?
So the question is, I've got a content management system. It's multiple levels deep. how does the search engine think about that? Do we stop after a certain level of depth, or do we not stop when we do crawling? So the answer is, it's all about inbound links. Where are the links going into your website? And then how easy is it for us to navigate the structure of your website? If all the links are going 10 levels deep, we'll go 10 levels deep and grab that page, and then look around that page and see if there's anything valuable there. But if your content's 2 levels deep, it may not make much of a difference. However, from a consumer standpoint or a customer standpoint, it may make a difference to them. If your site is very hierarchical and makes a lot of sense, they can use the URL to explore. And a lot of advanced and even intermediate users will do that. So figure out what makes sense for your customers in your navigation and go to it. Last question, right there.
Are there tools that you would recommend besides yourself or help us, analyze
Yes.
sites?
Question is about tools. I do have a slide about tools that I'll recommend. I won't talk much about them, but I'll give you a link to all of the best tools, and in the space upstairs afterwards, I'll go through any one you'd like and teach you how to use it. Sound good? Cool. So, okay, one last question. You just
Does the number of URLs in a page can be penalizing point? If the page has too many URLs.
So the question is, do the number of URLs, could they possibly penalize you if you have too many URLs? And the answer is, it depends. So if your page is like all the other pages on your website and they're rich, they've got deep content, and they've got a lot of outbound links, no, it shouldn't hurt you. But if your page is abnormal in some way where there's not a lot of content on your pages and you have a lot of them and there's a lot of outbound links on every single page, that starts to fit the pattern of link farm, link site. So it can, but generally if you're building pages for your customers, most likely it won't. Right on. Cool. So, it's 4 o'clock. All right, so advanced topics. Really, I was just going to cover these if anyone had a question on them, but we'll have some more time at the end. But there's basically a bunch of advanced topics in here. When you guys get the slides, feel free to go through the slides and take a look. There's a lot of really cool stuff in there. Tools of the trade. So I break the tools up into a few buckets. The first page is on-page optimization. So these are a set of tools for both Firefox and IE that lets you look into your page and see if you're doing all the right things or not doing the right things. And they're all the best of the best. The second major thing is links, right? Because I talked a lot about links being really important. Use Yahoo Site Explorer. It lets you take a deep look at all the links pointing into your website and all the links they've found pointing out of your website. And then keyword research. I didn't talk a lot about keywords today, but that's a pillar of SEO. Basically, you want to make sure that you're using the right vocabulary that your customers are using. And we have a tool from Ad Center that essentially it's a plug-in to Excel, and that hooks right into our database with all the keywords that people are searching on. And what we do is we'll tell you what keywords are driving traffic to your page. So you can use that to determine what people are searching for that arrive at your page. And then you can do other cool stuff like see how that changes over time. You can see what synonyms are. So if people are looking for Volkswagen Jetta, are there other synonyms that they're using to describe that, like Jetta, VW? I don't know what other examples are, but you can figure it out. So download it, use it, play with it. It's very cool stuff. And then I wanted to shamelessly demo my product really quickly to show you what we have to offer. Okay. All right, so webmaster.live.com, and it renders like crap on Firefox. Sorry, I can't live with that. Let's, in that, there we go. So that's actually a known bug, and we're going to push the fix out very soon. But webmaster.live.com. So this is a one-stop shop for anybody who cares about getting better results from live, where we've kind of pulled together all of the different resources available from Microsoft for you guys. So on the left-hand side, we have different ways to get more traffic. Essentially, if you had structured content, whether it's a product listing, if you have physical stores, you can tell us where those physical stores are located. If you have an e-commerce site, you can upload all of the product descriptions and URLs, and we'll surface those in both our local listings as well as our product listing online services, and that will drive more traffic back to your different websites. Enhance your website. We also have some stuff that can make your website better. You can stick a map on it. You can build a custom site search. There's also something that isn't up here yet. It's a competitor to Google Analytics. It's called Ad Center Analytics, and it's essentially a free web metrics analytic platform. It's very, very cool. And then the last section is technical support, and I'll drill into that real quick. We have a blog that where we publish a lot of SEO advice. So are we actually going to the blog? Yes, we are. And we also have a forum where anyone can come and post a question to ask us about a crawling issue, an indexing issue, a sitemap issue, or anything like that. So on our blog, we post some general SEO advice as well as news on what we're doing and any launches. For example, if maybe there's going to be a launch in the spring, you might want to come and subscribe to our RSS feed. So as soon as our launch happens, you'll know about it, and you can come and sign up and do all that cool stuff. So we also have some forums that you can come and ask a bunch of questions. We have a couple people who will answer those questions, and they're very friendly. And then the last thing we have is the actual Webmaster Tool itself. We can take a look at my dad's blog. Oops, which I didn't register. How about my aunt's blog? Cool. And what our tools do is we give you, we answer people's top couple questions. So am I being indexed? How many pages in my website are being indexed? And are there any penalties against my website? So this tells you if there's any penalties. My aunt's website, again, so there's no one linking to her website. So it's not got a very high rank, and therefore we've only indexed one page, which is the home page. And we last visited there in November, just after Thanksgiving. So I should have a much more interesting website to show. I'll do that next time. So we have enough time to do a review of one website. And I'm going to pick that one website. I grabbed these. And we can do some others up in the open space. But, careerbuilder.com. Be gentle. I love it. All right. Okay. Let's do this guy, because it's a website I have never, ever heard of, and I'm curious what's on there. And I'll actually want to do it in Firefox. Okay, so who owns this website? Will you raise your hand? di.se. Ah, cool. Will you tell us, do you have any problems? Are you experiencing any problems with your website? Constantly?
Not with problems like that. This is like the Financial Times of Sweden.
Okay.
This is our business to get visitors to your site. 600,000 unique visitors per week, and of course we're always trying to improve traffic to the site, where search engines are of course a major part.
Okay. So let's first take a look at the page itself. So this is a huge, complicated page. And the first thing I don't see is an H1 tag. Do you guys have H1 tags on your homepage? No. Let's take a look at the descriptions. I know your development environment. Okay, so you've got keywords and you've got description. That's good that you've got a description. Keywords, you don't need to do keywords. What will happen is a lot of competitors will come and take a look at this keywords tag and use that to do their own keyword mining. And it's not helping you out with search engines at all, so you might want to take that down.
Is that a general thing? Keywords are just ignored now, is that?
Yes, yes. Nobody uses these keyword tags, except your competitors. So I take that back. People use them, competitors. And you're using frames. Interesting. Okay.
Do iframes negatively impact SEO?
Iframes do not negatively impact SEO. Frames themselves, don't negatively impact SEO, but they're generally a bad user experience, especially if you look at down-level user experiences. So you can imagine someone trying to access this on a smartphone or a mobile phone. What the mobile browsers do is they'll go out and they'll try and render this in a down-level experience. And when they hit a frame set, they kind of freak out. They're like, uh-oh, what are all these pages? And they tend to provide a suboptimal experience. So the first thing is title tag. All you have is the name of your company in your title tag. Is there anything else like news or premier news or something else that your customers might want to type in this geography that would link to your page? That's a big one. The second big one is H1 tag. If you don't have an H1 tag, all the content on your page is about the same value to us because we don't have a whole lot in the title tag to go on, and we don't have any H1 tag to go on. I had some other, let's see. So let's take a look at the way you do linking and see if there's anything in here. So Stockwatch. That's a great example. We can take a look at this article too. So from a user experience, this is one of the big problems with frames. I am excited about this article. Vattenfall Investor R. This is cool. This is good stuff. It's big. I want to send it to everybody I know. How do I do that? Where's the link? So maybe it's this guy right here. Maybe it's this guy. Typically, I don't want to use this. I just want to grab, cut and paste, and just send it to everybody I know. Or maybe I'm a Delicious user and I want to tag it with Delicious. Or maybe I use a social bookmarking tool like Blue Dot or faves.com. And I want to share it with all my friends. Because it's stuck behind a frame set, it makes it really difficult for you to take advantage of viral marketing or word-of-mouth marketing. And if we look at the, open a new tab, if we look at the URL you have here, there's no URL rewriting going on. So while I don't know what these words say, I don't know if they're useful to a search engine or not in terms of giving that, in terms of figuring out what's on this page. So if you were to do some URL rewriting, you could put a much more descriptive URL there. And then let's check one more thing. Let's go to site search.yahoo.com. And let's check your canonicalization. Let's see if your traffic is being split or not. Whoops. All right. So 91,000 inbound links. That's pretty freaking cool. You're beating my blog by like just a little bit. And then let's do dub. 18,000. 91 to 18,000. So you're not doing canonicalization, so it looks like there's probably a lot of extra URLs that you're not getting the combined link juice from. So that could also help bump you up for a lot of the words you're looking for. And then there's a bunch of advanced stuff. So non-US websites, search outside of the US is much, much more difficult than search inside the US. Because all the crawlers are written by people in Washington or California for the most part, and they didn't really know other languages. So there's a lot of cues that we look at that are appropriate for North America that maybe aren't appropriate for other places. So that is my time. I'm over time. It's flashing. But if I'll go through the rest of these if you guys want in the open space. And thank you very much for your time.